The holographic image came to life in the Great Hall of United Earth Parliament. Blue light filled the room and fell upon the faces of humanity's greatest leaders. They sat in silence as the alien figure appeared before them. Ambassador Zethkara of the Vellani Dominion stood tall in the projection. Her skin looked like glass, and her eyes held no warmth. Humans had learned to read alien expressions over the years. This one showed only contempt. "The Galaxy Council has made its decision," she said. Her voice came through the translation machines cold and clear. "Humanity will destroy its space fleet within 90 standard cycles. Your ships have moved into the Orion Corridor. This breaks 17 treaties. Your species never signed these treaties, but you must still follow them. If you do not obey, the 12-member species will attack you together." Admiral Nathan Cole sat in the upper gallery, watching everything. His hands were rough from years of service, and his hair had turned gray long ago. He was 63 years old now. He had seen humanity take its first steps into space. He had watched them fail and rise again many times. He remembered the day humans first met the Vellani. It had gone badly. Human traders were killed for crossing borders they could not see. President Linda Morrison rose from her chair. Her voice did not shake. "Ambassador, humanity was never asked to join your council. No one told us about these treaties. We will not give up our right to live among the stars." The hologram vanished without another word. In the days that followed, reports came flooding into Earth Command. The Galaxy Council was preparing for war. The Vellani Dominion had 800 warships. Each one could burn a continent to ash. The Kreth Swarm was a race of insects that flew in thousands of ships. The Moravian Collective was made of living stone and silicon. They had not lost a single war in 40,000 years. Humanity had 300 ships. They had been flying through space for only 50 years. Admiral Cole received a message to come to the secret bunker beneath Geneva. President Morrison waited there with the Joint Chiefs of the military. Maps covered every wall. Red marks showed where enemy ships were gathering. There were so many red marks. General Patricia Webb spoke first. Her silver hair was pulled back tight, and her face showed no fear. "They think we will surrender. Every species before us did. The Talani gave up in just a few days. The Novari handed over their home planet rather than fight." "Then they are wrong about us," Cole said. He walked to a control panel and brought up a new display. This information had been kept secret at the highest level for 20 years. "It is time to show them what we have really been building." The display showed a massive station hidden in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. It was carved into a rock called Forge Station. The station was enormous, and inside it, humanity had been building something that would change everything. The meeting lasted for hours. Cole explained what had been happening in secret. When humans first met the Galaxy Council, they were treated like dirt. Trade was limited. Travel was controlled. Humans who went too far into space simply disappeared. No one ever found them, so the leaders of Earth made a choice. In public, they followed the rules. They kept their fleets small and weak. But in secret, they built Forge Station. They brought the smartest scientists and engineers. They created weapons and ships that were generations ahead of anything the Council had. President Morrison listened carefully. When Cole finished, she nodded slowly. "How many ships?" 400 warships that do not officially exist," Cole replied. "Ships bigger and more powerful than anything the Council has ever seen. Weapons they cannot even imagine. And soldiers trained for every kind of combat." "Why did we keep this secret for so long?" asked General Webb. Cole turned to face her. "Because we hoped we would never need it. We are not a species that loves war. But we are a species that will not be pushed into extinction." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what was about to happen. In just a few weeks, the Council's deadline would pass. And then humanity would have to make a choice. Kneel or fight, far away in space, the Council's fleet continued to gather. Ships from 12 different species came together in numbers that blocked out the stars. They had done this many times before. Young species always gave up in the end. There was no other choice. On Earth, people went about their daily lives. Most of them did not know about the ultimatum. The government had kept it quiet to prevent panic. But some people sensed that something was wrong. The news talked about increased military activity. Ships were moving in strange patterns. Something big was coming. Admiral Cole spent his final days on Earth visiting the places he loved. He walked along the beaches of what used to be California. He visited the memorial for the soldiers who died in the climate wars. He sat in a small cafe in Geneva and drank coffee. While watching people pass by, he thought about what humanity had survived to reach this point. Ice ages that nearly wiped them out. Plagues that killed millions. Wars that burned entire cities. Climate disasters that changed the face of the planet. Through all of it, humanity had refused to die, and now they faced their greatest test. An entire galaxy wanted them gone. 12 ancient species had decided that humans had no right to exist among the stars. The odds were impossible. The enemy was overwhelming, but Cole had read the history books. He knew that humanity had faced impossible odds before, and somehow, against all logic, they had survived. 3 days before the deadline, Cole boarded a shuttle leaving Earth. He watched his home planet grow smaller through the window. Blue oceans and green lands disappeared into the darkness of space. He wondered if he would ever see it again. The shuttle flew for hours through the cold void. Finally, it approached a massive asteroid that looked like nothing special. But as they got closer, hidden doors began to open. Lights flickered on inside the rock. The shuttle flew into the heart of Forge Station. What Cole saw inside took his breath away, even though he had helped plan it. Hundreds of warships filled the hollowed space. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time. Each one was a masterpiece of human engineering. Each one was built for a war that nobody wanted but everyone knew was coming. Commander Benjamin Grant met Cole at the landing bay. He was younger than Cole, only 41, but his eyes held the same weight. He had spent 15 years preparing for this moment. Admiral Grant said with a salute, "The Terran fleet is ready." Cole looked out at the ships that would decide humanity's fate. 400 vessels built in secret, thousands of men and women ready to fight. Technology that would shock the galaxy. "Good," Cole said quietly, "because in 3 days, we are going to war." Commander Benjamin Grant walked slowly along the observation deck of the TFS Constellation. This was the flagship of the Terran fleet, and it was massive. The ship stretched nearly 3 kilometers from front to back. Weapons covered every surface. Around it, floating in perfect formation, waited 400 more warships. None of them existed in any official record. To the rest of the galaxy, they were ghosts. The stealth systems worked perfectly, reported Lieutenant Amy Vance from her station. She was young, barely 30, but she was one of the best sensor operators in the fleet. Council scouts flew within 50,000 kilometers of us last month. They saw nothing. Grant nodded, but did not smile. He was 41 years old and had given 15 years of his life to this fleet. He had trained for a war he prayed would never come. But now it was here, and there was no turning back. The story of how this fleet came to exist was known only to a few. When humanity first reached the stars and met the Galaxy Council, they were treated like insects. The older species looked at humans with disgust. Trade was restricted to worthless goods. Human ships could only travel in small areas of space, and those who broke the rules were never seen again. The leaders of Earth realized the truth very quickly. The Galaxy Council did not want peace with humanity. They wanted submission. And eventually, they would want extinction, so a plan was created in absolute secrecy. The public fleet would remain small and harmless. But hidden in the asteroid belt, inside a hollowed rock called Forge Station, humanity would build its true power. Only the highest leaders knew about it. Only the most trusted people worked there. For 20 years, the smartest minds on Earth came to Forge Station. Scientists who should have won awards worked in secret instead. Engineers who could have become rich built weapons instead of consumer products. Soldiers who wanted to serve humanity trained in the darkness of space, and they built wonders. The quantum slip drive was their greatest achievement. Normal ships took months or years to cross the vast distances between stars. Ships with quantum slip could cross a light year in just minutes. The Council had nothing like it. They did not even know it was possible. The hull plating was another miracle. Most ship armor simply tried to block enemy weapons. Terran armor absorbed the energy and redirected it. A laser that should destroy the ship would instead make it stronger. The Council's weapons would be almost useless. Then there were the kinetic accelerators. Simple weapons in theory, but devastating in practice. They fired rods of solid tungsten at a fraction of the speed of light. No shield could stop them. No armor could survive them. A single shot could punch through a Council battleship from front to back. Grant had helped test all of these systems. He had watched targets explode into nothing. He had felt the power of these weapons shake his bones, and he had wondered every single day if they would ever be used. Now he knew the answer. Admiral. Cole arrived at Forge Station 2 days before the Council's deadline. His shuttle landed in the main bay, and Grant was there to meet him. The two men had known each other for years. They had planned for this moment together, but neither had spoken about how it would feel when it actually came. "The fleet is ready," Grant said simply. Cole looked around at the ships filling the massive cavern. His old eyes moved from one vessel to the next. He had helped design some of them. He had approved the plans for others. They were all his children in a way. "Gather the crew," Cole said. "I want to speak to everyone." Within an hour, every man and woman in the Terran fleet was listening. Some were on their ships. Others were in the halls of Forge Station. But all of them heard the Admiral's voice through their communication systems. "For 50 years, Cole began, we have been told that we are young, that we are weak, that we do not matter. The Galaxy Council pushed us into the corners of space that nobody else wanted. They killed our people and expected us to stay silent. They made rules we had to follow, but never agreed to." He paused, and the silence stretched across hundreds of ships. "Tomorrow, the Council expects humanity to kneel. They have done this to dozens of species before us. Every single one gave up. Every single one accepted their fate. But we are not like them." Grant stood on the bridge of the constellation and felt the words in his heart. "We are the species that survived ice ages when we should have frozen. We are the species that beat plagues when we should have died. We are the species that rebuilt after wars when we should have given up. We looked at our planet and made it our own. Then we looked at the stars and said, 'Those belong to us too,' across the fleet. Men and women straightened their backs and lifted their heads. Tomorrow, we will show the Galaxy Council what happens when you corner humanity. We will show them what we have been building. We will show them that we will never surrender, never submit, and never disappear quietly into the night." The response came like thunder. Cheers erupted on every ship. Fists pounded against walls. Voices roared through communication channels. The sound of it filled Forge Station and echoed off the metal walls. Grant watched Cole stand calm in the middle of it all. The old Admiral's face showed no pride, no excitement, only determination. When the noise faded, Cole gave his final order. "Prepare the fleet for departure. We leave in 6 hours." The next 6 hours were controlled chaos. Engineers ran final checks on every system. Pilots tested their controls one more time. Soldiers loaded their weapons and checked their armor. Everyone knew what was at stake. Grant found himself in his quarters during the last hour, looking at a photograph. It showed his family on Earth, his wife and 2 children. They did not know where he really was. They thought he was on a research station studying asteroids. He had lied to them for 15 years. If things went wrong tomorrow, he would never see them again. But if things went wrong tomorrow, they would eventually suffer under Council rule anyway. He was not just fighting for humanity. He was fighting for them. At the appointed time, the doors of Forge Station opened wide. One by one, the ships of the Terran fleet flew out into open space. They formed perfect lines and columns. A wall of metal and firepower that stretched for thousands of kilometers. From his position on the constellation's bridge, Cole looked at the fleet he had helped create. It was beautiful and terrible, a promise and a threat. "Set course for the Council Armada," he ordered. "Let them see what we have become. The quantum slip drives activated with a sound like tearing fabric. Reality bent around the ships. And then, in a flash of light that nobody outside the fleet could see, 400 warships vanished from the asteroid belt. They were going to meet their destiny, the galaxy. Council Armada waited at the edge of human space like a wall of death. Over 3,000 warships from 12 different species hung in the darkness. Their lights blocked out the stars behind them. Each ship was built for one purpose only: to crush anyone foolish enough to resist the Council's will. Hi. Admiral Kethfer of the Moravian Collective stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Mandate. His body was made of living crystal and silicon, and he had commanded fleets for longer than humanity had existed. He had done this exact thing 46 times before. The script was always the same. First, the young species would make angry speeches. Then they would realize they could not win. Then they would beg for mercy. Finally, they would surrender everything. Their worlds would be divided among council members. Their people would be moved to controlled zones. Within a generation, they would forget they had ever been free. Kethfer felt no excitement about this mission. It was routine. Humans were young and weak. They had only 300 small ships. The outcome was certain. The deadline passed at exactly midnight. Earth Standard Time. Kethfer opened a communication channel to broadcast humanity's last chance to surrender. He began to speak the words he had spoken so many times before. But then his sensors started screaming. Warning lights flashed across the command deck. Officers shouted in confusion. The tactical displays showed something impossible happening all around them. The Terran fleet emerged from quantum slip space in a perfect sphere surrounding the Council Armada. 400 warships appeared from nowhere. They had not been traveling through normal space. They had simply materialized like ghosts becoming solid. Their weapons were already powered up and aimed. Kethfer's crystal body went still. His processors struggled to understand what he was seeing. These ships were huge, far larger than anything in his own fleet. Their design was unknown. Their weapons were unknown. They had appeared using technology that should not exist. The human voice came through every communication channel in the Council fleet. This is Admiral Nathan Cole of the Terran fleet. You are surrounded. Our weapons are locked onto your ships. If you fire even one shot, we will destroy you completely. If you try to run, we will chase you down. Your only choice is to listen. On the bridge of the Constellation, Admiral Cole stood with his hands behind his back. His face was calm, but his heart was pounding. This was the moment that would decide everything. If the Council chose to fight, thousands would die on both sides. If they chose to listen, there might be hope. Commander Grant watched the sensor displays from his station. The Council ships were not moving. They were frozen in shock and fear. For the first time in 40,000 years, the great powers of the galaxy did not know what to do. Kethfer's response came after a long pause. His voice carried the anger of a being who had never been challenged. You dare to threaten the Council? Your primitive species will be wiped from existence. You will be forgotten. Your worlds will burn. Your children will serve us. Cole did not flinch. We are not threatening you, High Admiral. We are telling you the truth. Look at your sensors. Study our ships. Calculate the odds. Then make your choice. There was another pause. Kethfer was doing exactly what Cole suggested. His tactical officers were scanning the Terran ships, trying to understand their capabilities. What they found made them afraid. The human hull plating was unlike anything they had seen. Council weapons would barely scratch it. The human drives were impossibly fast. The human weapons were devastating beyond measure. A single Terran ship could destroy a dozen Council vessels. But Kethfer was old, and his pride was older still. No young species had ever stood against the Council. None ever would. The very idea was an insult that could not be tolerated. All ships, Kethfer commanded. Attack. 3,000 Council warships opened fire at once. Beams of energy and streams of plasma crossed the void. Missiles launched by the hundreds. The space between the fleets became a storm of destruction aimed at humanity. On the Constellation, Lieutenant Vance called out the incoming fire. Multiple impacts in 3 seconds. 2 seconds. 1 second. Contact. The weapon struck the Terran ships. Energy beams splashed against hull plating and vanished. Plasma washed over armor without leaving a mark. Missiles exploded against shields that held without effort. Not a single Terran ship was damaged. Cole let the Council fire for 30 seconds. He wanted them to understand. He wanted them to see their best weapons fail completely. He wanted them to feel the fear that so many other species had felt facing them. Then he gave the order. Turn fire. Disable only. I want survivors. The Terran fleet responded as one. Kinetic accelerators fired tungsten rods at incredible speeds. Energy weapons that the Council had no name for sliced through space. Point defense systems shot down missiles before they could reach their targets. Council ships began to die. The Villani flagship lost its engines in the first volley. A Kreth carrier broke in half when a tungsten rod punched through its center. Moravian cruisers, the pride of their fleet, tumbled powerless when their power cores were surgically destroyed. Grant watched the battle unfold on his displays. It was not really a battle. It was a lesson. The Terran weapons were designed to disable, not destroy. They aimed for engines, weapons, and power systems. They left the crew alive when possible. But some Council captains refused to stop fighting. They kept firing even as their ships fell apart around them. Those ships had to be destroyed completely. The battle lasted exactly 7 minutes. When it ended, 8. They had no power, no weapons, no engines. But their crews were alive. 1,200 other ships had been destroyed because they would not surrender. The eternal mandate hung motionless in the void. Its crystal hull was cracked. Its systems were dark. High Admiral Kethfer stood alone on his ruined bridge, surrounded by the bodies of officers who had tried to fight the boarding teams. Human soldiers in combat, armor moved through the corridors of the flagship. They met little resistance now. The fight had gone out of the Council forces. Commander Grant led the team that reached the command deck. Kethfer turned to face him. The ancient being's crystal form flickered with dying light. "Is this possible?" Kethfer demanded. "You are children. You have existed for only a moment. We ruled this galaxy before your son was born." Grant removed his helmet and let the alien see his human face. Young, determined, unafraid. "That has always been your mistake," Grant said. "You counted our years instead of measuring our will. You counted our ships instead of understanding our hearts. Every species you conquered accepted that the universe did not care if they lived or died. Humanity never accepted that." He signaled his team, and they moved forward to secure the High Admiral. "We are taking you to our flagship. Your war is over." The greatest military force the galaxy had ever known had been defeated in 7 minutes. And humanity was just getting started. The silence after the battle was heavier than the fighting itself. 3,000 Council ships had come to crush humanity. Now 1,800 of them drifted powerless in the void, their crews alive but helpless. 1,200 more had been reduced to burning wreckage and floating debris. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the Constellation and looked at the destruction through the main view screen. He felt no joy in what had happened. War was never something to celebrate, but it had been necessary. The Council had given humanity no other choice. "Begin rescue operations," Cole ordered. "I want medical teams on every disabled ship within the hour. Treat their wounded the same as our own." Commander Grant raised an eyebrow at this order. The Council had never shown such mercy to the species they conquered. But he understood what Cole was doing. This was not just about winning a battle. It was about showing the galaxy what kind of species humanity really was. Human shuttles flew out to the crippled Council vessels. Medical teams in white armor boarded ships filled with enemies and began treating the injured. Some of the alien crews resisted at first. They expected to be killed or tortured. When the humans instead gave them medicine and food, they did not know how to react. On the eternal mandate, High Admiral Kethfer was brought before Cole in chains of energy. The ancient being's crystal body was damaged but functional. His pride was hurt far worse than his form. "You have won nothing," Kethver said. His voice crackled with static from damaged systems. "The Council has thousands more ships, dozens more species. They will come for you. They will never stop until humanity is erased." Cole sat down across from his prisoner. He was tired. The weight of command pressed down on his shoulders, but his voice remained steady. "They can try," Cole said simply. "But I think you already know how that will end. Your best weapons could not scratch our hulls. Your fastest ships could not escape our drives. We built this fleet in secret for 20 years, while your council ignored us as primitives." Kethver was silent. The truth of Cole's words could not be denied. "I do not want more war," Cole continued. "I never wanted any war. We built the Terran fleet because we had no choice. Your council was going to destroy us eventually. We could either wait for death or prepare for survival. We chose survival." The Admiral stood and walked to the view screen. Outside, the stars continued to shine as they always had. The universe did not care about the politics of the creatures living in it. "Send a message to every council world," Cole ordered. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them that humanity offers peace, but will accept war if forced. Tell them that we are not conquerors, but we will never be conquered." The message went out at faster than light speed. It reached hundreds of worlds in hours. It told the story of the battle in simple terms. The Council's greatest fleet had been defeated in 7 minutes. Humanity had technology the Council could not match, and the humans were offering peace instead of demanding surrender. The reaction across the galaxy was mixed. Some species called for immediate revenge. The Kreth swarm pulled back to their hive worlds and began building more ships. They would return for vengeance, even if it took centuries. The Vellani Dominion split into factions. Some wanted to ally with humanity and share their technology. Others swore eternal hatred, but many species saw an opportunity. For 40,000 years, the Council had ruled through fear. Now that fear had been broken. Smaller species that had lived under Council control began to whisper about freedom. Trade guilds that had been forced to follow Council rules started to wonder if there might be another way. On Earth, the news spread slowly at first. The government could not keep the battle secret for long. Too many soldiers had family back home. Too many messages were sent. Within days, the whole planet knew. The celebrations lasted for weeks. Humans danced in the streets of every city. They had faced the greatest threat in their history and survived. More than survived. They had won. President Morrison addressed the planet from the steps of the United Earth Parliament. Her words were broadcast to every screen and speaker on Earth. "Today we learned something important about ourselves," she said. "We learned that we are not alone in the universe, and we learned that we can stand among the stars as equals. The road ahead will not be easy. There are still species that wish us harm, but we have proven that humanity will never bow to threats. We will never surrender our future, and we will never stop reaching for the stars." The speech became famous. Children would memorize it in schools for generations to come. Back in space, Admiral Cole began the long work of turning victory into peace. The captured Council officers were treated well and eventually returned to their own species. The disabled ships were repaired enough to limp home. Only the High Admiral was kept as a prisoner, and even he was treated with respect. Commander Grant oversaw the return of the Terran fleet to Forge Station. The ships that had been built in secret were no longer secret. The galaxy knew they existed now. That changed everything. "What happens next?" Grant asked Cole during a quiet moment on the constellation. Cole looked out at the stars. Negotiations, politics, the hard work of building something that lasts longer than a single battle. "The Council will not accept this easily. Some species will never forgive us. But if we are careful and wise, we might create something better than what existed before. And if we fail," the Admiral smiled grimly, "then we fight again, and again, until they understand that we will never give up. Humanity has survived ice ages, and plagues, and world wars. We will survive this too." The fleet reached Forge Station a week later. The massive doors opened to welcome them home. Inside, engineers and workers cheered as each ship passed through. They had built these vessels with their own hands. Now those vessels had saved their species. Grant walked through the corridors of the station and saw faces filled with hope. These people had worked in secret for 20 years. They had missed birthdays and holidays and the births of their children. They had given up normal lives to prepare for a threat that might never come. Now that threat had come, and they had been ready. In his quarters, Grant finally called his family. His wife answered, her face appearing on the screen with tears in her eyes. "I know everything," she said before he could speak. "The news told us what happened." "What you did?" "What you have been doing all these years." Grant felt his own eyes grow wet. "I am sorry I could not tell you. The secrecy was necessary." "I know," she said. "I am not angry. I am proud. Our children are proud. The whole world is proud of what you and the others have done." For the first time since the battle, Grant allowed himself to feel the emotions he'd been holding back. Relief, joy, hope. The weight of 15 years of secret service finally lifted from his shoulders. The Terran fleet had done its job. Humanity was safe. And now the real work of building a future among the stars could finally begin. 6 months passed after the Battle of the Boundary. That was the name historians gave to the day when humanity broke the power of the Galaxy Council. In those 6 months, the universe changed more than it had in 40,000 years. A new station was built in the empty space between stars. It belonged to no species and no government. It floated alone in the darkness, a place where enemies could become something else. Delegates from across the galaxy traveled there to discuss the future. Admiral Nathan Cole arrived aboard the Constellation with 50 warships as escort. It was a small fraction of the Terran fleet's full strength, but it was enough to make a statement. Humanity came to these negotiations from a position of power, not weakness. The station's halls were filled with beings from dozens of species. Some walked on 2 legs like humans. Others floated in anti-gravity fields. Some breathed oxygen while others needed methane or ammonia. The diversity of life in the galaxy was astonishing, and for the first time, humanity was seeing it as equals rather than outsiders. Ambassador Zethkura of the Villani Dominion was there. She was the same diplomat who had delivered the original ultimatum to Earth. Now, she sat across from human negotiators and spoke words she had never imagined. Using with a younger species, "Are prepared to discuss equal partnership," she said. Her crystalline face showed no emotion, but her voice carried a new tone. Respect, perhaps even fear. The Villani Dominion recognizes humanity's right to the Orion Corridor and all territories currently held by human colonies. President Linda Morrison led the human delegation. She had aged in the past 6 months. The stress of guiding humanity through its greatest crisis had left its mark. But her mind was sharp, and her will was iron. "Equal partnership requires equal treatment," Morrison replied. "No more trade restrictions. No more travel limits. Human ships will go where they wish, and human citizens will be protected by the same laws as any other species." The negotiations lasted 3 weeks. Every day brought new arguments and new compromises. Some species refused to accept the new reality at all. The Kreth swarm sent no delegates. Their hive minds had decided that humanity must be destroyed, even if it took 10,000 years. They withdrew to their distant worlds and began preparing for a war that would come in some future generation. The Moravian Collective sent representatives, but they were cold and hostile. High Admiral Kethfer had been released back to his people, and he had told them everything about his defeat. The Collective could not accept that their 40,000 years of dominance had ended. They signed the treaty because they had no choice, but everyone knew they would look for ways to break it. Other species saw opportunity. The Talani had been conquered by the Council centuries ago. Now they sent secret messages to Earth asking for help in winning their freedom. The Novari, who had given up their homeworld rather than fight, wondered if humanity might help them take it back. Commander Benjamin Grant attended the negotiations as part of the military delegation. He watched the politics unfold with a mixture of hope and caution. Peace treaties were just words on paper. What mattered was whether the species involved actually wanted peace. Some of them will never accept us, Grant said to Cole during a private moment. The Kreth, the Moravians. They see us as a threat that must be eliminated. Cole nodded slowly. I know. We have bought time, not permanent safety. The Terran fleet will need to stay strong for generations. Maybe forever. Was it worth it? The battle? The deaths? All those council ships we destroyed? The old admiral thought about the question for a long time. Ask me again in 100 years. If humanity is still free and still reaching for the stars, then yes, it was worth it. The treaty was signed on the last day of negotiations. 47 species put their marks on a document that created a new galaxy council. This one would include humanity as a permanent member. This one would operate on principles of equality and mutual respect. This one would not survive its first test from the Kreth or the Moravians. But it would be replaced by something slightly better. And that would be replaced by something better still. Progress was slow. Change never came easily. But it came. On Earth, the celebrations of victory gradually faded into normal life. People went back to work and school. They raised their children and built their homes. But something had changed in the human spirit. They walked a little taller now. They looked at the night sky with new eyes. Grant returned to Earth after the treaty signing. He had been gone from his family for too long. His children had grown while he served in secret. He had missed their first steps and their first words, and a thousand other moments that could never be recovered. But when he walked through the door of his home, they ran to him with open arms. His wife held him close and whispered that everything was forgiven. The sacrifices of the past were paid for by the safety of the future. Admiral Cole retired to a small house on the coast. He had served humanity for over 40 years. Now he wanted nothing more than to watch the ocean and feel the sun on his face. He had done his duty. The rest was up to others years past. Human ships traveled farther than ever before. They established colonies on worlds that had once been forbidden. They traded with species that had once looked down on them. They built and explored and dreamed. The Terran fleet remained strong. New ships were built to replace old ones. New officers were trained to replace those who retired. The galaxy remained dangerous, and humanity never forgot the lesson of the Battle of the Boundary. Peace was precious, but it had to be protected. In the halls of the new Galaxy Council, human delegates walked among the oldest species in the universe. Some still hated them. Some still feared them. But all respected them, and a new saying began to spread from world to world, passed down from elder to youth. Never corner humanity. They do not know how to surrender. Admiral Cole lived long enough to see the first human ambassador take a permanent seat on the council. He watched the broadcast from his small house by the sea, tears running down his weathered face. He remembered the ultimatum that had started everything. He remembered the fear and the doubt and the impossible odds, and he remembered that humanity had faced all of it and refused to break. He died peacefully a year later, surrounded by family and friends. His funeral was attended by representatives from a dozen species who had once been enemies. They came to honor the man who had changed the galaxy forever. Grant gave the final speech at the ceremony. He was older now, gray-haired and worn by years of service. But his voice was strong as he spoke about his friend and mentor. Nathan Cole never wanted to be a hero. He just wanted humanity to survive, to have a chance to grow and learn and become something worthy of the stars. He gave us that chance. What we do with it is up to us. The sun set over the ocean as the ceremony ended. Stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the same stars that humanity had reached for since the beginning of their history. Now those stars belonged to them as much as anyone else. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders and dangers. But humanity had proven that they belonged there. Not as servants or subjects, not as children to be guided by older species, but as equals. And that made all the difference.